takes a minute for the recording to start for some reason. There we go. Okay, so we are recording now. So thank you everybody for joining. This is July 28th. This is the first SIG Platform meeting for Nefio. We've had our other SIG meetings this week. I see a lot of familiar faces from those meetings. Appreciate you all coming. And like I said yesterday, there will be some repeats, but I think we have different things to discuss here than in the other SIGs. So 1 second, let me share the agenda. I guess for those who joined late, if you want, here's the link for, in that wiki page is the link for the agenda. All right, SIG Platform.
Should we use this for meeting notes also? That's what we do in our Magma community.
So for the meeting notes and the agenda, it should be the same document. I think we might end up moving it all to the wiki because it seems like that might work better for people, but I'll send out probably sometime next week a survey about that, and we'll try to, there's advantages to the Google tooling, and Linux Foundation wanted to try out using the Google tooling rather than the ones they've traditionally used. There's advantages if everybody's willing to have a Google account. Like, it makes things super easy as far as collaboration and calendaring and access control in particular. But it's not always that easy. There's other things that it makes difficult, like publicly sharing documents. I can't do that from my Google account, my corporate account, and probably many other people can't. And so that makes some challenges. So anyway, that's a different topic. That's SIG release, and we will talk about, I'll send out probably write something up sometime next week and send something out. But for now, welcome, like I said. Can somebody volunteer? I've forgotten to do this in the other SIG meetings. I think it's a good practice if we can make it a habit in our meetings for somebody to volunteer as a note taker, and we can rotate that role. If anybody wants to just put themselves in chat because they're a generous soul, I would appreciate that. But I'm not getting any takers. Okay. Well, hopefully,
I can take the notes. Actually, I was looking for the link.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Thank you, Shivan. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Okay, I found it.
The thing I hate is sometimes we have meetings like this and we talk about things and then nobody writes it down and then we forget about it and about it again in 2 weeks. So getting good notes is helpful. I did try to put action items in some of the other meeting notes, but okay. So that's kind of logistics. As I mentioned in previous calls, for anybody who wasn't on those, the TSC hasn't met yet to give us our procedures for how to pick our chair and vice chair, but that will be happening, I hope, soon. And the other item, kind of logistically or welcome-wise, is what's the scope of this SIG? So we've talked in the previous meetings, the scope of those things. I see the scope of this SIG as really about the underlying sort of container for all of the logic. So the basic user workflow, the user interface services, the installation, the standing up of Nefio, kind of the software architecture of Nefio, not the, that's why we call it network architecture SIG, the other SIG, because that we want to be around the telco knowledge. This SIG contains kind of the software architecture and the underpinning. So the configuration is data concepts, how packages work and interdependencies between packages work, and not specific packages and specific interdependencies, but just sort of the practices and techniques and things like that, as well as how a package goes through a certain life cycle from a user perspective. Obviously, that's the platform. I see that as that's what I call it, a platform, needs to support the use cases developed by the network architecture SIG, or identified by the network architecture SIG, and then implemented by the SIG, the network the automation machinery SIG. The idea being that those two SIGs, like it's almost like the high level business requirements of what a network looks like and what the pieces are and how they fit together, and the information modeling comes out of network architecture. Then that's the logical model. Then that gets realized into some sort of set of CRDs and controllers and operators in the automation machinery SIG, and then that automation machinery SIG will make use of platform pieces in order to implement some of those things and techniques that the platform team maybe comes up with. And then, of course, the platform also just hosts all of that software and hosts all of that workflow. So that's how we've divided up the SIGs right now. And then, of course, the release one is sort of the machinery of running a project and making it happen. Jean-Marie? You're on mute.
I don't know why I'm always getting caught by mute buttons. Yeah, a question. Does it mean that the meta model, the metadata that the CRDs and other data models that this SIG2 will define will be, so that metadata and meta model will be the responsibility of this SIG machinery, or do you see the responsibility of another SIG?
For this SIG, I don't see this SIG having any telco specific knowledge. Let's put it that way. Like,
I'm not talking about the telco specific knowledge,
okay.
But is this SIG the SIG that will define what is a Nefio CRD?
No, I see that coming more out of the automation machinery, like what a Nefio CRD is, and what, like, let's say when we go through, maybe we'll go through this sort of very simple use case I've put together, and we can talk a little bit about it there, and we can, and that might help clarify. I don't see this. There might be some, yes, like for example, if we say that we need a way to express dependencies, we might do that in either SIG, right? Either SIG, I don't know. I guess probably.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good example.
Yeah.
How we model dependency, which SIG is defining it?
I don't know yet. That's a good question. I would say that there's three places that could. So, at the very, that could be in. Let's put it this way: if the KEPT tooling, the KEPT project, came up with a way to generically model dependencies between packages, for example, we may simply use that. If we're ahead of that project, which at this point we are, because we haven't done that in KEPT, we've talked about it, we haven't done it, we may need to, as an FEO community, figure out how to do it and then implement it ourselves, in which case I think it could live in either SIG. I don't have an strong opinion about that. So I think that's a good question. I think over time we'll figure that out.
Should we bring it to the TSC?
I think it's a little early for that. I think I like maybe. I mean, that certainly would seem like where something lives, which SIG it lives in, could go to the TSC. But I would think that let's see if we can just.
Yeah, I think it's okay to ask the TSC if we have absolutely no opinion on the answer, if there is no answer that we prefer to another ones. Otherwise, I would be in favor to ask more oriented questions to the TSC than just wide open questions.
Yeah, I would think like I would see the TSC as an escalation point. Like if the chair of SIG automation machinery and the chair of SIG platform are fighting over this and can't get along and really want this scope, then we can ask the TSC to decide. But I hope that our community is more friendly than that, and we can come to cooperative agreements before it reaches that point. But you never know. Okay, so that's a good question. It gets pushed down to the platform, and this is always a question whenever we're building something so unknown, so new. What's going to happen is we're going to develop new ideas and functionality and features likely coming out of automation machinery SIG, and then there'll be a discussion. Hey, we need this. Should it be in the platform, meaning the Nefio platform, or should it be in the underlying kept platform? Which means we need to talk to the kept team, right? The kept maintainers, project maintainers. Okay, so the other thing, any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, we just one question. I don't. Sorry, I'm just trying to take notes, but there are no major points. So if you have some major points, then do let me know if I'm forgetting to take notes. Right.
Yeah, and it's also, Shubin, if you want, you can take notes right up there in the agenda. They don't need to be separate. Just put people's names before it if people are making a point or something. Whatever's most convenient. And obviously, just because Shubin's being generous and volunteering to notes, others are, it's a collaborative document. Anybody can do it, can enter things. Yeah, Sundar.
Yes.
Hi. So would the outcome from the SIG be essentially some kind of a reference architecture, reference implementation? We actually have a GitHub repo where they can actually demonstrate how all the pieces come together, things of that nature?
Yes, exactly. The idea would be the output of the SIG is we had this in one of the decks from the summit, but probably should have copied it here. The output of the SIG should be effectively a running Nefio system that you can. The idea, I think the way I put it in the deck in the SIG was you bring your own Kubernetes cluster as your Nefio central cluster, and then from there, you can install Nefio and have it up and running. That means that, and that means we have the major pieces in place, like even in our own installation, we start to run into issues like dependency management. So for example, we need an infrastructure management component, and we can select one of several. And so,
Yeah, I got the picture. But when you say bring your own Kubernetes cluster, I thought that this project is going to define some CRDs for cluster creation and such, and others can bring their own operators for those CRDs, right? So as part of this reference implementation, should we not use our own CRDs to create the clusters in the first place?
Well, we have to bootstrap, right? We have to have somewhere to run our code. So that's just, you have to bring your own bootstrap cluster, and then from there you should provision other clusters.
Okay, sounds good.
So the question was if we have to bring our own cluster or not. That was the question.
Yes. So as John said, we have to do a bootstrap cluster first, but eventually I suppose we can use CRDs defined by Nefio to even create the clusters.
Yes, although, this is where we'll get later as we go on. Like this project, we talked about automation machinery, I think. This project isn't going to try to, reproduce all the cluster creation projects out there, right? Instead, it's going to consume the ones that exist. So, but there'll be packages. We need to. This is part of what we need to sort out exactly how to do that. But and we technically could theoretically go the route others have gone with a bootstrap kind, like an install script that bootstraps a kind cluster and then installs their operator in there and then uses that to provision. I'm not sure that's worth the trouble.
Mhm.
I put that out as a much later thing if we decide we want to do that personally. That's my opinion.
Sure, I get that. Sure, I agree with that. So regarding documentation, I suppose the automation SIG will define the basic documentation for CRDs and such, and this SIG will produce documentation for reference implementation, right?
Yeah.
How do you actually put the pieces together? How does the demo come together? Things like that would be documented in this SIG, right?
Yes, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Cool.
So scope-wise documentation of the reference implementation. Like basically, you can think of this thing as delivering the final product, taking what's been built by the other SIGs, and maybe there'll be multiple SIGs. I mean, release does the builds and stuff, but so I guess part of that falls into release too. But so I don't know. We'll see where the lines exactly fall. And like I've said in other calls, these SIGs are a rough draft themselves. In fact, these SIGs don't exist yet because the TFC hasn't met.
Yeah.
We're just we're using optimistic concurrency in our cycle here. We're assuming that we're going to get these SIGs, and we're starting meetings. If we decide that the scope's not really in the right places, we can always change that.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, John. That's it. Yep.
You. Okay, so I have on here milestone discussion. I wanted to talk a little bit about we have we'd like to move quickly, and that means we really need to lay out a roadmap. We don't have a use case yet and things like that, but that's actually not as much of a problem for this SIG. So this SIG needs to deliver. We know we need to deliver. A working container to receive the controllers and CRDs that come out of automation machinery SIG. So by container, I mean receptacle, not in the Docker container sense, but like a running platform, I guess is the word, that. And that kind of machinery can be put together even before any controllers have been delivered by automation machinery. So I'd like to get some thoughts down. As part of SIG release, I have an action item to kind of propose a repository structure, which would help us figure out where this platform is going to live. So that would also need this group's input. So I hope to do that next week. But I'd love to set some deadlines around hey, we want to be able to have, even if it's not nothing fancy, right? Just something that people can run by when, even if it doesn't do anything yet. It's alive. What's the date on that? Hey, Talia, what's up?
Yeah, so I know in the workshop, you mentioned that Google will donate some sort of lab space. I don't know the exact details, but we do need to start with some sort of lab space, install all this, right? To have a shared space that we can all access.
So I don't know about lab as in hardware. I don't. Did you say lab space? I don't. What we talked about donating some seed code at some point.
Okay.
But I don't recall lab space. That's definitely something we could bring to the TFC about, and we can bring to. So Kandan, as the product manager for us in this, would be the one who would be the one to talk to about that. I mean, we are funding the Nefio.org GCP organization, but and that things maybe what you're thinking of is I was talking about to run CI, right? To run CI. I mean, we spend literally millions of dollars a year to run Kubernetes CI. Obviously, we're nowhere near the scale and scope of Kubernetes, but it's going to cost some dollars, and so we do have something of a budget for that, I think, but I don't really do the budgeting at this point. Yeah. John,
Okay, well,
it's tough.
but I do mean our challenge. Yeah, we could potentially use public cloud, Google public cloud, but we're aiming for bare metal. We're aiming for air-gapped environments. So we will need some sort of lab to do our CI/CD at some point, and those take a long time from experience to set up. So I think it should be on the agenda to, maybe one of the participants would volunteer some space. All of us have labs that we do work.
Right.
Some of them have public access. So we, okay, I see Jean-Marie has his hand up. So let's hear.
No, isn't it the charter of SIG 4?
Yeah, this would be more of a topic for the SIG release, like how the CI is set up, how the CD how the development environments are set up. Yes, so that would be a great thing, Chal, to throw on the agenda. Maybe, I was thinking about your comment about ad hoc meetings. I mean, we might want to have some meetings next week too, but so try to take that along. But we should have that discussion there probably. Okay. Okay, so Milestone. So I mean, it's still a little ill-defined and unformed as far as what those milestones might look like. But I mean, we can set a high level. I know, Tal, you were saying by the end of the year release. I don't remember if that's what we said or we said.
That's what you said.
That?
Yeah, I think that's what Tal said, but I think on the summit we keep on saying about Q1 2023.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought we were
okay.
Q3. Yeah.
Okay, so by Q1 means I see by the end of Q1. Okay,
yes.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll give you that 4 months. All right.
Yeah, it's just a big difference. It's like double our time. But nonetheless, we need to back that up and like look at what the schedule is going to look like. And find out when we have like a first light for something on the platform sake. That's kind of what I'm getting at. What's our first light? And even if it's crap, excuse my language. So I mean, I would love something end of August to see something where somebody can download it and get something up and running, and maybe manually we can do some pieces of it, and we'll go through this scenario document in a minute. But I guess, what are people's thoughts about that sort of time frame? We have to figure out how to collaborate on this and who's going to contribute and all of that. So maybe it's premature to put a date, but I feel like dates and deadlines tend to make people do things. And so anyway, any thoughts?
I have a question. In previous meeting, Stephen said that he'll be presenting a demo maybe like after next 2 weeks. So will there be like code for us to replicate that scene?
Yeah, so there'll be some. So we'll go through this thing in a minute. I'm not sure at Stephen's demo how soon he can have code that he can share, but I do want. I'll be sharing stuff very soon around, but it's not. I wouldn't consider it first light. It's still more like I'm giving you a pile of Legos, and you can put it together yourself. So that wouldn't, but there'll be some pieces that we've constructed, and we can start to put together opinions on how we might do it in a more robust way. So that we should have next week sometime. I'll have next week, and we'll go through the document now in a minute. And theoretically, that could host the pieces Stephen's working on, which are more.
Yeah, that would be good for you to have the Lego blocks, and I can put together the Lego blocks.
Yeah.
As a seed.
So maybe it's premature to talk a date, but maybe we have an ad hoc meeting next week. We need repositories, and we need a document that describes what the heck we're trying to deliver. Maybe we give ourselves a date for that. So by next meeting of this group, say 2 weeks, we can have a document that provides a high-level design, more than what we have in the one slide in the in the community deck, or even the 20 slides that I talk through different components. We can actually write it down a little bit better, and maybe have that to review, or review it offline, and then have a live Q&A in the next call. That might be a good way to proceed. Yeah, Vish.
Yeah, so you said high-level design doc, which is specific to this SIG, right? Is it going to be hosted on GitHub repo, or is it going to be just Google Doc? The reason I am asking you this is if it is going to be an artifact of the project, it is better to be on GitHub, and then we can actually provide our comments there and go through that process, the review. What are you thinking? Just curious.
This is something we talked about yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yesterday, or in the SIG release?
More like Monday, yeah.
Monday time. In SIG release. So we have a little bit of things are a little messy right now, in figuring out where to best keep these kind of project artifacts. Some people want to use the wiki, some people want to use Google Docs, some people want to use GitHub. I think we need to probably settle on something so that everything's not scattered everywhere. And so I intend to write up, and again, this is like now the third thing I'm saying I'm doing, so it's a lot. But I tend to write up a little blurb saying, hey, here's the different options and pros and cons of each. Barrier to entry on GitHub is pretty high for a lot of people. The wiki, I haven't tried the line-by-line commenting. The wiki, doesn't, I don't know how good it's going to be. Definitely, obviously, for code, it's GitHub. Although, Tal, I'm not sure how helpfully suggested, what about GitLab yesterday or the other day, but but being open. But I think, personally, I don't intend to, if Tal's interested in that, he can propose that. But I'm not keen on switching away.
Well, they also requested to move away from Google stuff, because we have folks from Wind Rivers and potentially Marvineers that are from China, so they wouldn't be able to access it correctly.
Right.
So not officially wouldn't be able to access it.
Right. So anyway, that's there's a different discussion for a different SIG, and we have to make that decision. But Vish, I hear you, and I'm frustrated too. And,
okay. I missed the SIG release meeting, sorry, but thank you for summarizing.
Oh yeah, that's okay. So we're trying to figure that out. That's the short of that. We're trying to figure that out.
Cool.
Google Docs, because it's easy for me and it's quick for me, but like even this document, I originally shared it from my Google corporate account, and then I'm like, I can't do that because now people who don't want to come in anonymously can't, because I can't, the policies don't let me do that. And so I had to share it from my nephew, and so other people are going to have the same problem with Google Docs. So as great as they are from a collaboration standpoint, they're not as great for an open community like this. They're great for an internal, that we're not their use case that they're thinking about when they're developing Google Docs of publicly shared documents editable by the world. So at least not on the corporate side, maybe on the consumer side. Like even in Kubernetes, I use my Gmail account to create my documents so that anybody can access them. So, which is an alternative, right? And so they'll put that in the documents as alternatives. And then we can just as a community decide, and we just all have to go along with whatever we decide. Okay, so let's, unless people are, I'll take an action item. Just to like recognize this automatically when I put my email in there, but um, how do I call them? Okay. Then let's take a look at this document. It's not entirely within the scope of this SIG, but what it will help illustrate, I hope. And this is something we could potentially do an ad hoc meeting for the other SIGs and go through it. It's very early, but I hope it will demonstrate. We'll start to see where the boundaries of the different SIGs fall in this sort of use case conception. And this is, I need to switch tabs. Then I'm not share this tab instead. I hope, I'm signing myself up for a lot of things, and this isn't my only job, but I hope that I can demo a working version of at least a couple of these scenarios in 2 weeks at the network. In fact, in a week really, because at the network, hopefully at the next network architecture meeting. But this is a work in progress. It is not a complete document, and people are free to suggest or comment or criticize in any way. I am not easily offended. This is not intended to be real world. It's super basic and simple. It's working with Core DNS, which is not really maybe a telco type network function, although I imagine you need DNS, but it's a network service, but it's something I'm familiar with. And so it makes it easy for me to put together the scenario. So the basic things I'm trying to exercise here are really about the user journey. Like what should the software enable and deliver? And then start to look at, for a given package that we're managing or configuring or deploying, what types of customizations and operations might need to be done on that package to deliver it to solve a certain problem. So the problem I picked is really easy, well, relatively. It's caching DNS. Caching DNS has 0 state, which makes it a lot easier. All you do is stand up something, and since it's Core DNS, it's not recursive. It's I don't know how much, most of you are network people, you know a fair bit about DNS probably, but basically it just sits here and serves as a layer where it gets queries in. Anything that's not in its cache, it just asks another DNS server to figure out what it is, and then it puts it in its cache. That's all it does. It doesn't do the whole recursive navigate the labels and all of that. We leave that to an upstream DNS server. So super simple software that is basically just a cache that understands DNS on one end and DNS on the outbound as well. Okay. And feel free to ask questions anywhere along the line if people have questions.
So, okay, I might be jumping ahead. I'll let you continue. Sorry.
Okay. So what we're trying to do, like I said, is this just this very. So my strategy here, right, is let's start as simple as possible. Let's see how that will work. And what we're thinking about here is the user at that point, and then we start to make it a little more complex, a little more complex, a little more complex, until we get something that looks a little more realistic. All right. So creating a basic package, customizing that package, automatically deploying that package across a set of clusters with some tweak to the configuration in that cluster, and then what I call light customization of the application's internal configuration. So this would be normally, this bullet is normally our swim lane 3, if you remember, where we talked about like this is application config. When I say light customization, I'm not trying to model that configuration at all in CRDs. I'm just treating it as a text blob and dealing with it like that. So really, I'm focused primarily on swim lane 2, which is the workload deployment and customization. I'm not trying to address infrastructure. I'm assuming my infrastructure in this sort of loosely coupled discussion we had yesterday. I'm assuming my infrastructure is set up, and I'm assuming that my changes to my application config are super simple. And so I'm really focused on that middle tier just to try and exercise the machinery and see how it happens. Setup and prereq. So this is effectively what this SIG, as SIG platform, needs to do. Obviously, there'll be more because there's like 10 other components that aren't talked about here, like feedback loop and metrics and all that stuff. But like at a very, very low level, a very, very simplistic critical path type of level, you need a cluster. I'm using GK because it's easy for me. You need a cluster, and you need certain software running in that cluster. The sort of bare minimum of what we need running in that cluster is this thing called Porch, which we talked about a little bit. That's provides a Kubernetes style API on top of Git repositories. So this is what allows us to use Kubernetes controllers and Kubernetes CLIs to read and write things out of Git repositories. It also implements execution of kept functions during that hydration pipeline, and probably we should also install the Porch UI. So there's a UI for it. It's very simple. It's a plugin for Backstage. Backstage is a Kubernetes sort of operations dashboard that Spotify, I think, or Shopify. The names are so similar. One of the two of them, it's a CNCF project. Porch has implemented a UI there. This is really just for our use now, and maybe in version 0.5, that'll be our UI for Nephew, but we'll need our own UI. That's in scope for this team to build and define, or to choose to use this and customize it, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. Yeah, I think we have hands, and let's see which order they went in. Shubin.
Yeah. So, okay. So the Porch is the way we are using is similar to like GitOps. So our code is in Git, it will see and it will deploy. If code is changed on GitHub, it will like redeploy and sync with the latest state, right?
So it's not exactly. Yes, it provides some API layer to make GitOps simpler. It's not. It's not GitOps in and of itself. The config sync piece is more ties to GitOps, where once something's pushed to a repository, config sync will pull it and apply it to the API server. The Porch provides the server we can use for automation. So the opinionated workflow of this tooling is that a package goes through a life cycle of being a draft package, in which case it's being edited and it's not yet ready. Effectively, you're doing it in a branch. That's actually what it's doing. You're doing it in a branch, and you're making those changes. At some point, you request approval to that, and then once it's approved, it gets pushed to the deployment repo, so or to the main branch, and that's where config sync can pick it up. Now that approval can be done by a human or it can be done by an automation. So in that sense, yes, you can implement certain GitOps workflows on top of that. You can also integrate it with existing GitOps CI workflows. For example, if you have an existing workflow that's monitoring repository A, which is your sort of config repository, and delivers to the deployment repository, it could pick it up after Porch says it's approved. So it's just another, it's almost another control point we're putting in, which could be sitting kind of in front of your standard pipeline if you want, or frankly, in the middle of it somewhere if you want. So I think in the diagrams we said optional CI/CD. It was come sort of after Porch, and that's kind of the current vision. You know, to be clear, I'm pretty involved in the KEPT project as well, which is where Porch comes from, and we can, you know, if we have different requirements or different ideas, we can, you know, bring that to that community, and we can also talk about whether that we can shift Porch to be able to support if we've got a different idea of a workflow. Like right now, it's opinionated in a certain way as a platform. This is, we get back to this earlier discussion, and Tal, I know you're waiting patiently. We get to that earlier discussion of Nephew has a certain way we want to do things. What we can do is, of our upstream projects, we can request and provide them with requirements and say, we'd like to use you to do this, but you know, you're not working quite the way we need. And then that community can figure out how to satisfy those requirements as well as requirements of their other constituents, of their other users. So that's kind of how I would see that right now. For like first light, I'm taking what I'm given because it's easy. And then, but we as a team need to decide whether that's the right workflows for Nephew. Yeah, Tal.
So I'll be blunt. I hope that's okay. I think you're used to me being blunt. So look, the from Red Hat's perspective, this putting KPT KEPT into the mix from the start was a little worrying. To an extent, it's orthogonal to the problem of trying to deliver network functions on Kubernetes, right? This is about the workflow, your CI/CD workflow, and how you actually push changes. I'm worried about this becoming a requirement, right? You put it here in part of setting up the Nephew cluster. Well, you know, this is the cluster maybe for this project. I'm not making any kind of merit-based. I have no problem with KEPT in itself, right? But Red Hat has investments in its own CI/CD solutions, right? That we push strongly based around Argo. I mean, even you mentioned that Argo could be used functionally instead. So I'm fine, you know, if you yourself are comfortable with KEPT, and you obviously are because you're involved in the product, sure, we can use it in terms of setting this up. But I think we have to be very careful here about talking about KEPT being a component of Nephew, right? This is something that needs to be discussed in a greater, you know, sense of the TSC and everything. What is in scope? What is not in scope? And that's just what I want to be careful about. That we know what we're doing here. This is for this particular example, and not generally for Nephew.
Right. I mean, David, just let me respond, and then you can jump in. So I hear you, and we, you know, the piece that's critical to me, and the reason I think this particular piece is a little different, is that we need a configuration management solution that's amenable to automation and can, you know, we've talked a lot about being able to express our requirements between packages, for example, and dependencies, in terms of CRDs, and then ways to satisfy those, and ways to automate the configuration and manipulation of those packages. And so to me, there's two kind of pillars to Nephew. One is Kubernetes everywhere, top to bottom of the stack, and two is configuration as data. And I know this is more controversial, is what you're saying, but I believe that we will have a difficult time meeting the actual functional requirements unless we have a way to manage the configuration that's amenable to machine automation. And I don't know of other, that doesn't have to be kept. I think it has to probably be KRM based in some sense. But I don't, I think as we evolve, to me, it will become clear. I'm not sure how else you would do this. And we can talk about it maybe as we evolve those pieces, whether there's a way to create some interface that can be implemented as opposed to requiring this specific set of solutions. But at this point, I'm not clear of another way to do it. David, I think you had a comment. I see your hands down.
Yeah, I don't know how the hand got down, but that's beside the point. Thank you. I agree with the point that specifically including a version of tools, a specific tool, is risky. I would extend that to specific, including a specific workflow, even an opinionated one. For the project, that's fine, right? We're saying we're implementing Nefio, and to do that, we're using these tool sets. And I get that, and I agree with that. But I think the point you made, the important aspect from my perspective of Nefio is that KRM model around that stuff. How those KRMs get deployed into the system is an implementation specific choice that people will do various different ways. They'll have various different workflows and checkpoints within the CI/CD pipeline to make that happen. So I think when I hear, whether it's kept or a porch saying these must be the tools we use, that becomes problematic for me. I think, again, for the exemplar application, great. But
okay, well,
for thou shalt is a little more worrisome.
That's fair. That's fair. I can get behind that. I don't have actually. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think, and that was kind of the idea behind it's a reference implementation, like the Nefio project. I think I said it at the summit too. Like it would be. My hope, my sincerest hope is that each of these participating companies like Red Hat and other orchestration vendors, Amdocs, Ericsson, Nokia, other cloud providers, including Google and other cloud providers. I hope everybody takes all this stuff we're doing and makes their own products out of it and commercializes it. That would be, that's the goal. That would be the dream. And they're going to make their own choices about those things. And so I hear you. Let's make it flexible. I think that I'm not sure how other people would do it, and I think that's okay. We can. Gosh, we're running low on time. Okay, I'll stop.
Can I just say that you can fix my concern very simply. It's really one word here that bothered me is you say set up the Nefio cluster. Let's just call it set up the cluster.
Okay.
And then I'll feel much better, because calling it the Nefio cluster seems to already say this is how a Nefio cluster looks. And I think we're all basically on the same page here. We're saying, yeah, we need some sort of tooling to start up. We're not trying to dictate what that tooling should be. So for this example, and possibly for a reference implementation, maybe it'll use kept. If the community as a whole feels like this new tooling is interesting and useful and applicable here, we can go with it. But make sure that it's always decoupled from that specific tooling, as David said, that. And as you guys said too, right, in the workshop, you emphasized again and again that if somebody wants to use Argo, they can use Argo. Well, we have to put our money where our mouth is there and make sure that we're really keeping it decoupled.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. Hossein?
Yes, I like everything we're discussing here, and I can get behind most of the things that we discussed. Just about the proposal to remove the Nefio cluster, to me, it was put there to sort of contrast it against the edge clusters that are the places where those workloads come in. So we need something to qualify that, I guess. It doesn't have to be Nefio, but it has to be some orchestrator cluster or something, I feel.
That's a good point. Originally in our, before the summit, all of our documents said management cluster or administration cluster or orchestration cluster. And then we're like, it's just easier. People understand it better if we just call it the Nefio cluster because it's where Nefio lives. That was the idea. It wasn't so much to say that this is the only thing that can be in there, or that it must be in this exact way. So, but
it sounds like you mean management cluster, and the management cluster can run other things other than FEO components, I imagine.
Sure, yeah. All right, we'll just call it management for now. All right.
That's fine, sure.
That's right. It's to distinguish it from the other one. Okay. So on time, I'm going to just very quickly. So I mean, you guys obviously can review this offline. Like I said, it's a work in progress. In particular, scenario 3 is completely undefined, or almost completely undefined. But starts super simple, right? We'll have a simple package. We'll show how that package can be deployed in one cluster. Next, we take and we deploy that same package to multiple edge clusters with very minimal customization, just maybe changing the namespace. Then we build a controller, a CRD controller that can do that same behavior, but it does it by looking at looking for either repositories or clusters, and basically it's a CRD that says install this package in any clusters matching this label selector using this namespace name. Very simple still. That's scenario 1. Yes, Jean-Marie.
Yeah, I have a kind of a problem. Maybe it's just the vocabulary, but with the what you just said. A CRD is representing a resource, and the CR is the metadata representing a resource.
Yes,
but it should not represent an operation. So to me, saying a CRD is representing I want to deploy a package is kind of a contradiction.
It's a declarative specification, really. It's a CR contains, but it's a declarative representation saying I want.
So you don't want to install the package. You want a package to be running.
Correct.
To be deployed. You don't want to deploy it. You want it to be deployed. And that's very important. And I have a similar problem or questioning later on in the document about a scale operation. No. Operation and CRDs, I have question marks.
No, that's a great point. Okay, well, let's I would be thrilled if you put comments in the document with regard to that. You're right. We should be more careful about how we describe it as an intended state rather than an operation to be performed. Because yes, we don't want to ignore day 2 right from the beginning. Okay. All right. So that's scenario 1. Super basic, simple. The package itself has effectively no customizations done to it.
Can I ask a quick meta question?
Yeah.
So why, our use case is going to be 5G RAN. Why not pick a 5G related component, something that we know works?
Because I'm the one writing this and I don't know anything about those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
I see.
So this is to exercise the machinery, and and frankly, also, then people might argue about aspects that aren't necessarily relevant to exercising that machinery. But that's not why. The reason is because I don't know any of those things. This is something I know, and so if I'm writing it, I'll start with something I know, so I don't have to waste time learning something else. That's it.
Yeah, actually, so for mine, it's actually going to be 35GC UPF, so it's a little more relevant. And because mine is built for SIG2, so I'm also throwing some CLDs out there, so it's a little different, I guess. For John is trying to show the platform and mechanics and machineries, and then I'm trying to show you how using that tools that could work
Oh,
his
okay.
actual 5G.
Maybe I misunderstood something here. So each of you guys are presenting these as demos of what you're working on. You're not proposing this as something for the team to do as a whole, or am I?
Correct. Right now, I am proposing something I intend to demo in a week or two.
Okay.
That's what I'm proposing. And there was a discussion yesterday. We're pretty much out of time. Please review it offline. We can have maybe an ad hoc meeting next week or something. But there was a proposal. Fabrizio, I think, was asking yesterday or the other day, hey, can we sort of see an example of what a use case might look like? Now, this, again, is not a 5G use case at all. And I sort of preface this with, this is a network service. This is just what I know. But it starts to get into some of the same problems, just the details are different, but some of the problems are the same, right? Like I have to touch the application config, or I have to put a constraint. There's no point in running an instance of CoreDNS with 15 CPUs, because you'll saturate your NIC with one CPU. So why have 15 of them, right? So that means I need instead 15 replicas, right? And so can I express that in the package, as an author of the package, a policy that when somebody tries to configure 4 CPUs for this, you throw up a warning and saying, if you're going to use 4 CPUs for this, you probably need to have like a NIC that's like a 10 gig NIC, right? You're not going to do it on a 1 gig NIC, which is fine, then you can do that. But, and then, okay, if that's the case, how do we tune that? How do we, is there a way we can express a dependency of a package that says there's a 10 gig NIC versus a 1 gig NIC, right? Like, can we encode?
There are solutions, there's the topology operator, but anyway, I'm don't mean to derail. I'll be excited to see what you built here. It looks interesting.
So, but that's the whole point, Cal. What are those solutions that exist in the ecosystem today? How would we express those solutions in our configuration packages that we're trying to deploy? So that's exactly, thank you. And put that a comment in, like, this is one way you could figure that out.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'm excited to see this. And thank you guys for, moving this forward and already having POCs ready to show us. It will be helpful.
Yeah, I'm just trying to form mental models for people, really, is what this is about. So, okay, thank you, everybody. We're totally out of time, and I have another meeting. So thank you all, and see you sometime soon. Maybe we'll have a meeting next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.